Lovely to see you all. I think we've probably got enough to get going for now, and there's a few more people who hopefully trickle in. Welcome to this evening's panel. It's a pleasure to be here as part of Music Victoria's event for how live streaming is evolving. So thank you all for signing up and making the time this evening. And there's a few kind of housekeeping things I might just say for you, and then we'll get stuck into a conversation. So we've got a really great panel here today, and excited to see how much we can cover of a pretty huge topic. So first of all, I might just ask if you're watching along to switch off your cameras, just so I can see John, Emily and Eilish nice and clearly, and I don't wind up looking into the wrong screens and missing if anyone has something to say. That'd be great. And we'll hopefully get some time at the end to do some questions. So what I might do is just, once we get to the end of our conversation, ask if you do have any questions, just to drop them into the chat on the Zoom call. And we'll have a look and hopefully address them. But yeah, see how we go. Great. So I might kick things off. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of this land that at least I'm on for this panel discussion. And I would like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to any other Indigenous Australians who might be present on this call. And yeah, as mentioned, the topic for this evening is going to be how live streaming is evolving. Obviously, it's been a big year and a lot of movement and change in this kind of corner of the music industry. So we're very lucky to be joined by three people who have really been quite instrumental in it over the last few months. That's Emily Ullman, who's here, and Em's had a huge year running Isolate and putting that together, and John Hall as well, who's now working for Eighth Day Sound, who has obviously a huge amount of experience when it comes to audio production and live sound. And then Eilish Gilligan, who's a fantastic artist, joining us on the panel today. And she's been getting pretty deep into Twitch and seeing how that platform's been able to work in terms of live streaming. So is there anything that I've missed? Do you guys want to give yourselves a little intro at all? Feel free to. No? Okay, well, there you go. That's all good then. So I might kick off by just having a broad kind of question for all of us, and that's hopefully going to lead into a bit of discussion about 2020 as a whole, and then we'll hopefully touch on some elements of, how performance for live streaming is adapting and what that means for artists as well. Production and how that is going to change and hopefully adapt to really ensure that people do get the best quality sound that they can. We will touch on some of the platforms for it. Obviously there's Twitch, but there's also YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, a whole bunch of other kind of streaming platform options for artists and promoters and musicians. And then hopefully discuss some of the barriers and benefits. So what do we stand to gain, and what do we have to overcome as a music industry if we're going to really get the most out of this new, stream of performance. And then hopefully, we'll wrap it up and look to the future and see what 2021 and beyond could hold. So I might just kick things off by maybe throwing to you, Emily. Do you think that live streaming is a band-aid solution, in a strange year, or is it something that's here to stay?
First of all, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hugo. Such a good introduction. I feel like you've just sort of summarized everything, but I'm coming to you from the Wurundjeri land, the lands of the Kulin Nation. So I just wanted to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and also say hi to any First Nations people streaming today or in the future, because I think this is being recorded. But to answer your question about whether or not it's a band-aid solution, I don't think so. It's an interesting one for me because Isolate came together so quickly, and the idea was that it was going to be just that first weekend of bringing musicians to fans, existing and new, and also raise some money for Support Act and just give people the opportunity to basically connect with the music community, particularly here in Australia. But then, as the festival went on, I sort of realized how crucial streaming is now during a time where we don't have access to venues and borders are closed locally and internationally, but also just about how, just how important it is from an access point of view, reaching people in remote places or people who can't get to gigs, again, when borders are closed. And also, I guess, probably going to touch on it later, but just sort of like the different platforms and what they can offer artists wanting to achieve different things. So, whether, making money or just connecting or whatever it might be. So I think, no, it's absolutely not a Band-Aid solution. I think it's actually incredibly important. And it's sort of a happy accident that Isolade has led me to the point where I am now, where, I just want to make live streaming a part of my booking practice from here in.
Nice. And I guess you touched on something there, that it is this kind of new accidental sort of medium that we've stumbled upon a little bit out of necessity. Maybe we were going to get there at some point or another anyway, but it's clearly accelerated a lot this year. Eilish, do you think that, live streaming is just an extension of live performance, or does it perhaps require a slightly different approach from an artist who wants to put together a set and perform to people?
Well, when I first started streaming, I was using it as a replacement for live performance because I missed it so much and I was distraught at the idea that I couldn't do it. But the longer that I did it, I've been doing it since May. The longer that I did it, the more I realized that it's actually something not completely different, but it's very different to getting up and playing a 45-minute set at, the Ev or whatever. There's an element of people want more from you, like emphasis on from you. They want you. They want your music, but they want you. That's been my experience. And that makes it a pretty different experience in a really beautiful way, in my opinion. I've loved it. But yeah, it's different for sure.
And John, maybe just from a more of a production perspective, there's been a lot of changing, standards that people are used to when consuming music this year. And a lot of that is, kind of understanding from music lovers that artists are just kind of making do with what they can. Have you seen anyone who's really nailed the production side of things with live streaming, or are there any, pitfalls that people should be conscious of? Just on mute there, mate. Sorry.
My technology skills are fantastic. Look, I think that it's pretty obvious when you see someone performing in their lounge room on a phone. It makes it a little bit hard to hear. But then, when you see other artists, like I saw some of Eilish, there's some Vera Blue stuff that have more electronic base, where they're able to, have everything in a mix and produce almost that live sound. And I guess it just depends on your access to technology and your understanding of it and ability to use it. So, I mean, some bands, have just, I think the thing that a lot of people gravitate toward is the realness of a phone in a lounge room. And like Eilish was saying, just them, the artist, like there's no frills, there's no fancy technology. It's just the song and the artist. And that's what really comes across. And I think that for now, anyway, that people are really enjoying that. Whether that's something that people are going to be happy to continue seeing, maybe they're going to expect more. I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to see.
Emily, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Eilish was saying, just agree with that point of it just being something quite different. I think people sort of look at streaming as some sort of replacement or something, quite similar to the live, being somewhere and experiencing a live show IRL, when I sort of liken it to and use the analogy of Aussie rules, which will not surprise a lot of the viewers because I'm an AFL obsessive. But, I just liken it to the different codes, like, AFLM, AFLW, AFLX, like it's the same sport, but they're all incredibly different. And you sort of don't, if you can sort of suspend that idea that that it's the same thing. And if you're looking at them as quite individual sports or gigs or whatever it is, or the stream, then I think, you know, it's a much more enjoyable experience, and you sort of get a lot more out of it, and you can enjoy it for what it is, not for what it isn't.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that's super interesting that I guess you all have kind of touched on a little bit there is, you know, this is a new and unique kind of way that people can communicate with their fans. And Eilish, one thing you were saying is how they want the artist, like audiences who are willing to tune in from home. They're not there by accident. They haven't, you know, happened to walk into the pub and see that this band's playing, go, oh, I want to check it out. What techniques have you used to kind of really engage the audience through your streaming, I guess, like activity over the last few months?
Well, I think we possibly are going to get into this a bit later, but if you're not familiar with Twitch, the nature of the content on Twitch is it was originally founded as like a platform where people live stream themselves playing video games. And it's since grown into this incredible community where pretty much you can do whatever you like and people will watch it. Like the other day I was watching somebody in WA fishing, and it was just like that was that, and people were enjoying it. So I learnt very quickly that if I wanted to be on Twitch and I wanted to build a community on Twitch, which I did, I would need to stream for longer than a 45-minute set would take. I needed to find a way to fill at least 3 hours of content every time that I streamed. I'm now streaming 3 times a week. I was streaming 4 times a week, but I've taken it back down to 3 now that things are kind of opening up a little bit. And I found that because like people are tuning in on purpose to watch you, to get to know you as a person, it's perfectly okay to spend an hour talking to your community. That's what I've learned. You know, even just this morning I was streaming and I spoke for an hour before I started, you know, working on the song that I was working on today. And some people might not be comfortable with that. Like I've had a few crises of conscience or whatever you might call it, in regards to how much of my life do I want to share with everybody? Like how much of myself do I want to put in this online space? Like, am I selling myself to, you know, make people listen to my music? And I don't think it's that. I think it's something much more beautiful than that. I think it's your community just want to get to know you. And because they know you, they're more likely to want to see you succeed. And they're more likely to be excited when you put a song out. And they're more likely to tune in to an important stream if you make sure you tell them it's important, you know? So yeah, to answer the question, just talk to them like they're real people, you know?
That's super interesting as well, because obviously Twitch is optimized towards, as a platform, it's optimized towards longer form, you know, viewer habits and audience consumption. So the longer you go, the kind of better it gets, and the more the, you know, algorithm of Twitch will prioritize your content and get it to new audiences. Whereas, Emily, I know that Isolate is being based a lot on Instagram, where, you know, everyone's told to make things pop out in the first 3 seconds. Have you found that there's been any, I guess, tips that you've been able to share over the experience of this year that artists can use if they want to use Instagram?
I have a list of like do's and don'ts, if that's ever helpful, if anybody wants to hear them. But I guess Instagram was chosen sort of out of just necessity, and just because it was sort of like the most accessible. It just like if you basically have a phone, you can stream live. So for viewers and for musicians, it just meant that there were no prohibitors being able to participate in whichever way. So yeah, I guess, you know, there are cons with Instagram because there's a lot of content. It gets lost. You know, it's very, very unlikely that, like Eilish was saying, that that it's encouraged to spend hours and hours on Twitch, and it actually benefits you, and and Twitch, incentivizes that in various ways. Instagram, that, people will dwindle off, and we decided to have a 20-minute limit, firstly because that equates to sort of 4 songs and a bit of chat, and we felt like that was sort of a bit of a showcase or some kind of taste rather than an entire show, because the content is free So it doesn't sort of devalue the artist. It just gives people, the opportunity to discover and just to kind of get a taste of what the artist is like. So therefore they can follow them and pay for streams or see other live streams or buy their product or merch or whatever. And also, for the attention span reason, we just felt like 20 minutes was the optimum time to kind of keep people, like the Rage, when you're watching Rage and you're like, one more song, I'll just watch one more song and then I'll go to bed. It's like that. So we just thought that, 20 minutes was perfect. That would keep people kind of moves along and just keeps people basically locked in.
And then I guess, John, one thing that you've mentioned earlier, which kind of stood out was, there are certain genres that can benefit, I suppose, depending on the platform that you're using. The experience I've had at both, and sorry, it's saying the streams that we've done have been to Facebook, and there's the opportunity there to essentially take an output from a desk, put it into the platform and send out, really well mixed electronic music. Whereas Instagram, I suppose, lends itself more to that intimate acoustic performance. Do you see, I guess, any benefits of genre in particular when it comes to live streaming from an audio production perspective?
Look, I think the streams that I've done have been done to a dedicated streaming service like Vimeo, which we use, which has a larger bandwidth to take the content. I haven't had a lot of experience with social media platforms and streaming to that, other than what I've seen. But to sort of answer your question about genre, I don't think that I think that the songwriter will come through in the more Instagram, Facebook thing where they can just feature the song and themselves. And I think that's a hugely important thing, because it doesn't matter how much money you spend on production, if the song is no good, then what's the point? But a good song will always come through. But the thing I keep thinking about is it's got to be hugely exciting for artists in that, much the same way as perhaps the early rock and roll acts like Bob Dylan going electric and all of that stuff from the yesteryear. It's like there's kind of no rules, and the artist is kind of free to create and perform as they want.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting, the kind of what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable, or what an artist usually does versus what they can do when using this platform. Emily, is there something you had to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, just to follow on from what John was saying, that people, just seem to be more willing to take risks on these streams. And I guess what Eilish was saying, like the fact that you can write a song with an audience and sort of work and sort of hone your craft and while having people there with you. And because often with Isolate, like so many, pretty much every weekend there'll be an artist that would premiere a new song or try a song that they hadn't performed live before. And it just seems to be, I don't know if it's the intimacy or just the fact that oftentimes the artists are in their own space, their own home or studio, that there's just this safety or comfort or something. But I do think that artists are often, a lot more prepared to take risks and try new things and tell stories and share, show off their pets and their plants and their fairy lights.
There's one thing that I found really interesting this year, and going back to the kind of football analogy or comparison, is when the footy came back at first and there were no crowds, there was like a round where after every goal, it was just silence in the stadium. And it was super weird. And everyone was like, I don't know if I can watch this. And then when they started putting in the canned crowd sounds after each goal, it actually became far more watchable. And it's something that I noticed a few artists doing throughout the year, is especially live bands who can't, put together a set where their songs can intertwine without essentially rewriting and recomposing their songs. They would have a canned applause track after each song to avoid that kind of silence where they finish and then it's just empty room. But there's been lots of, little hacks like that I've seen people utilize that have been really effective. And I was wondering, Eilish, is there anything like that or any kind of tips or little tricks that you've found that you could share with people who are tuning in?
Listen, I think you should lean in to what it is. I don't think you should try and make it something that it's not. My taste is not to have the canned applause or the canned whatever. I just think that you have to accept that it's just not playing a show at the Ev. It's just not that. You just need to accept it and move on, and then we'll all be happy. And I think with Twitch and Instagram, and I'm pretty sure on like YouTube and Facebook as well, there's comments and things that are rolling through. So something that I will do, like once I've finished playing a song, is look through the comments and respond to the chat, because that's why they're commenting, so that you see it and that you respond to it. After a song is finished, that's a perfect time to do such a thing. And usually people are commenting because they like it, or they know this song, or they're interested in what the lyric is about or whatever. And it leads to a very natural discussion of the music that you're performing anyway. And I also think that musicians have a very special skill in that they're able to like weave the story of their music into the gig banter. And I don't think that there's any reason that that skill shouldn't translate to when you're sitting in your room live streaming. As it does on the stage, In fact, it's harder on the stage because you got people yelling at you to like play the next song or shut up or whatever. It's much easier when you're sitting in your bedroom and there's no one to interrupt you to tell a very long anecdote about why you wrote this great song, So just talk, like just fill the silence, you don't have to have canned applause. I promise it's not that scary.
Look, if I just jump in, I think that part of that, what that is the prospect of what the artist can create to put in that gap. Now, it could be dialogue, or it could be other musical interludes. It could be a drawing. It could be anything. And I think that's the excitement that I was alluding to. It's like there's no rules. Like just do something, And I think this is where people are really going to connect to the artist, because they're going to actually get more of an idea what's behind the art, because you get to see a true representation of who they are and where they're coming from by whether they're using, look, canned laughter or canned applause is a representation of, like, some bands have got that humor and they think it's funny and that's cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. And other bands would like to, like Eilish would like to talk, or lots of other musicians will talk, but some might like to just turn around and start painting something, or it's just open slather. And I think it's like Eilish says, you shouldn't limit yourself, just let your creativity go.
I had a really fantastic conversation with someone a few months back about it, who had a background in live streaming, for gaming, which is clearly like been around for a bit longer than music. In this sense, and they were saying that it's essentially the rebirth of public access television, and you can just tune in and be like, I don't know what the hell I'm watching, but it's entertaining, and I think that's a really interesting, it's kind of like sounds that's sort of the angle that you guys are going down with it, in terms of especially those longer form streams.
Yeah, I reckon, and I think that sort of like brings us back as well to knowing what the goal is, which platform you're on, why you're doing, because I didn't have a lot of time outside of Isolate this year, but the other streams, Eilish, I've watched a bunch of your Twitch streams, which I love, and I personally couldn't do what you do, which is right in front of other people and just chat and just so naturally. I just couldn't do that for hours on end. But also I saw an Angie McMahon stream, which was quite different because it was pre-recorded, it wasn't live. There wasn't a paywall, but you did pay to get a link that was active, I think, for 24 hours or something. And, just vastly different, the production and the video quality and all of it, because of, they're just doing different things basically. So I think that's, and if you're raising money or if you're raising awareness, Hugo, you spoke before about brand activations and things like, are you doing sponsoring something, bringing awareness to a particular cause? I just think all of those things, because very early on with Isolate, I wrote up this vision statement sort of thing that I still refer to, just to make sure that I'm kind of following a particular path that I set out to follow. Yeah, and so that helps me make sense of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, if I'm unsure about a particular idea, and I think that can really help, because if you're just, you know, on Instagram to connect with people and chat with existing like, you know, or to play a particular song, Alexander Biggs, you know, occasionally, like, he'll just pop up and play sort of 2-3 songs and then disappear, and that's just a way of, like, yeah, I just think that that's a really lovely form of engagement, and it's not part of a festival, it's not part of a greater lineup. I think that those sorts of things. Eilish, is part of your Twitch thing at all, the motivation is any of it monetary, out of interest?
Well, I entered this year, even before coronavirus, with a few problems that I wanted to solve as an artist. So my main 3 ones were, I need to grow an audience without radio play, because I'm not getting played on the radio, and without, like, editorial playlisting, because I'm not getting added to editorial playlists, which is totally fine. No worries. I just need to forge my own path and figure out how to grow my audience my own way. So there was that. I need to figure out how to engage my fans that are already here, and how to make content that they will enjoy from me. And my third problem was revenue. I needed to figure out a way to supplement my day job income, because I wasn't able to work full time because I'm a musician, but not working full time means that I had no money because I wasn't making money from music. So then coronavirus happened, and it got to the point where it was like, well, I can't even do gigs now, so I can't even build my audience that way or engage with my existing fans that way. So now I really need to find some answers to these problems. So I'd always loved Twitch. I love drag, and there's a lot of drag on Twitch, so I was already familiar with it in that sense. But then my managers came up to me and were like, we think you should start, like, streaming on Twitch. We think you're a good kind of candidate for this thing. Like, they're just trying to make original music more of a thing on the platform, like, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you know what, that sounds great. So ultimately, it's pretty much not solved entirely, but gone a very great way into solving those problems that I had at the beginning of the year. I've built a grassroots audience that's global, like, and reached these people that I would never have reached before, the way that I was, like, on the trajectory that I was on. I've created really interesting and fun content for my existing fans, people that are generally quite young and online and willing to engage with that platform. And I've created a revenue stream for myself, which, you know, it's not like, I'm not rich, I'm not, you know, quitting my day jobs, but it's something. It's more than I earn from streaming, significantly. And I think, like, Spotify and all that, not like live streaming. So yeah, there wasn't monetary motivation on it for me, because in case you don't know, Twitch has, like, a lot of options for financially supporting the streamer. You can donate as little as 1 cent, and that will be recognized and appreciated, or you can donate more in all these different ways. And you get rewarded in different ways. It's all a bit complicated, but I encourage you to go on Twitch and spend some time on there, if it sounds at all interesting to you. It's been wonderful for me. It's been such a blessing this year. It really has. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
The topic of how artists can turn, you know, this into a revenue stream, particularly when people's expectations can be pretty high when they pay for stuff online. I would really be interested to hear, other than Twitch and the experience that you've had, Eilish, which sounds like it's been a positive one. Emily and John, if you've kind of had any thoughts about it, and paywalls versus donations versus, you know, corporate partnerships to bankroll things and get a budget for it. Is there anything that has stood out or that you've found particularly good this year? Maybe Emily first.
I think it's a bummer that we don't have, what's that thing that they have in the States where you can just, like, it's like a PayPal thing, but, like, you can just pay artists.
Patreon?
No, it's not Patreon, but that's a great platform as well, that you can pay artists to, and then you get access to specific content, lyrics or behind the scenes or whatever it might be. Venmo, yes, thank you, Ro. Yes, thanks, Rosh. Yep, Venmo. That would be ideal, and I think, I think the technology is slower than the requirements a lot of the time, particularly here in Australia. So, but I do think that, that just creating the demand, like having the fans creates the demand. And so I think that whatever your desired thing, like whether it's a one-off stream that you work towards and you promote like a gig and you have restricted access to, or whether it's like Melbourne Music Week, for example, has just announced their lineup yesterday for their Melbourne Music Week Extended, and they have the IRL shows, and then they have the streamed versions that are cheaper. And I just think that that's a really smart way, and that's the future that I would be hoping for, where people can access the streamed versions for cheaper, because as Eilish touched on, the geographical boundaries disappear. You can create fans and reach people all over the world, and also capacity also disappears. So shows have already sold out for Melbourne Music Week, but all of a sudden it's a bit limitless. You can have as many people tuning in as possible and still paying for it.
John, was there any examples or thoughts you had on it? That seems,
Look, not really. I tend not to get too involved in that side of things, but I would say that in terms, once you're charging for this, if you're actually going to charge rather than a donation, you also have the option there to be able to give extra content for, say, higher prices, if you like a general admission ticket versus a VIP ticket. Some of the things that we were working on, we had VIPs that paid $5 more, and they got to chat to the band before the performance. This is when there was no audience. So the band would come on and they would have a chat, and they would play a song that they weren't going to play in the actual set that everybody else saw. So whether it was a new song or whatever it was. So, and it was just a little extra to engage with the audience. And they were able to just charge a little bit more for it. But, I think that that's the kind of thinking that a lot of them had. It's like, well, if we're going to charge premium, like what else can we do? What extra experience can we offer? So whether that was finishing the set and then doing a to-camera piece with perhaps even an interviewer or a friend, or reading the chats back and answering some questions just for an exclusive view or whatever. But, that's my thought.
Yeah. And Emily, something that you touched on, which is super interesting in the space, especially when, we've all had, we love music, which is why we're all here on this call, and we love going to gigs, and we love being in, sticky pub floors and spilling your pint when you're trying to watch the band play. And, that's obviously a huge part of the music experience for us. But now I think it was a great parallel is in the middle of the pandemic, or the lockdown in Melbourne, Melbourne International Film Festival happened, and it was all online. And obviously people are more used to watching movies at home than they are with gigs, but there's now a bit of debate or contention as to whether or not it should come back semi-online, semi-real life in future, and if that will affect how many people choose to go and watch something in a cinema. Do you think that's a challenge that venues will face if live streaming does become more of a thing, that if it's a cold Wednesday night and your friend's band's playing at the Tote, you might be like, oh, I'll just watch the stream at home kind of thing?
Can I answer this?
Yeah.
Well, it might surprise you to hear that I like football. No, so when that was a big concern of the AFL, that they thought that, that if they televised games, that audiences wouldn't go and watch live. And so they often delayed the telecast and by half an hour or more. But they did not, that just wasn't the case. They didn't find that at all. It didn't, it doesn't replace going and experiencing the real thing and being amongst the crowd. And I feel like it would be the same with gigs. There might be the odd person who, and I mean odd in the actual weird sense. No, there might be the odd person who, you know, wouldn't go to the gig, but, you know, I think, yeah, I just think that like one wouldn't replace the other or have any impact. Not on a great scale. That's my feeling. I think maybe it would depend on the size of the artist and where they are in their career, and if it's a launch, and, you know, all those various factors. If it's pouring with rain, if it's like one of those horrible Melbourne winter nights where, yeah, you don't want to do anything, you know, potentially. But my feeling is overall, in the balance of things, that that one wouldn't affect the other too much. In fact, you know, having streams, because like with Isolate, for example, I've just discovered so many artists that I'm so desperate to see live now. And I have no doubt as well, Eilish, like your Twitch followers would be obsessed with you. Like they will follow you now for the rest of their lives, and they will not only feel like they know you, but they obviously, you know, they will know you. And I feel like having that access and intimacy for a lot of these live streams will sort of create these lifelong fans who will be there and buy the merch and go to the shows and do all the things and be absolutely loyal and talk about you to their friends, who will then, you know, it's very much flow on effect.
And so you go, John.
Look, I just wanted to add to what Emily was saying, is it opens the artist up to other consumers, if you like, or punters that wouldn't normally be able to go and see them. And I think about like people in their sort of 40s and 50s with kids that used to go to gigs all the time, and now it's just not practical. They either live too far away, or they can't get a babysitter, or, you know, perhaps people with disabilities that can't move around and just don't have access to these venues. And all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to all these different niche consumer groups. So, you know, a few of the streams that we're getting comments from, you know, 40-something parents with the young kids going, I never thought I'd be able to go to a gig again. This was fantastic. I sat in my pajamas with the beer and watched my favorite band, you know, fantastic.
And what we're kind of straying into here is, or not straying, moving with purpose and intent, is less so the kind of streaming you've been doing this year, Eilish, which is that, you know, Twitch 3-hour live stream, and more like a kind of hybrid where there's a gig and we're extending the reach of it and potentially extending, you know, the presence of the artist in doing so through live streaming. When, you know, events are back, and, you know, we'll probably be doing the sit-down ones for a while with limited capacity, would you be open to having your gigs filmed and live streamed from the venue?
Yeah, maybe. I think because we were talking about how I'm quite adamant on the idea that they're two very separate mediums. Like performing live at a gig, at a show, is very different in my eyes to me doing a Twitch stream, because in my eyes, my Twitch stream has to go, like I did an EP launch on Twitch like a week ago, and that stream had to go for 3 hours. Like there was no, like it had to go for 3 hours, even though my set was 45 minutes. So, you know, I included a deep dive into the lyrics. Like we were looking at like how I produced this and how I did that and like blah, blah, blah. That experience is completely different to the EP launch that I will be doing in next year. I just think like live. I'm not against the idea of live streaming that to, you know, people paying customers or whatever. I just think that they would get a much richer experience if they were to tune into my Twitch channel instead, where they can still see me perform, but they'll also get all this extra content that's perfectly tailored to Twitch and for the chat and for like the community that is amassed there. I also have, I have some conflicting thoughts about like cross-posting, I suppose, in a live stream sense, and in my eyes, that feels like a little bit of cross-posting. Like it feels like cross-posting, I should say, like making something that doesn't necessarily work or hasn't been exactly tailored to work like on a different platform to put it on that platform. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that maybe it's not for me, particularly when I already have this other platform that is especially for that. You know what I mean? And that's not going to be everyone's experience at all. Like, I totally understand, like what John was saying before, the vibe of like parents who just want to watch a gig who haven't been able to access that. I think live streaming a show from a pub for that purpose is awesome. I think I would just need to think about it before I did it.
And if I can just, like, another extension of this is something perhaps that artists need to think about is touring, and that, you know, it's going to be cost prohibitive to tour just Australia, let alone impossible to tour internationally. So how do you connect with your audience there? And I think that, you know, this streaming can be a form of artists being able to play to a certain time zone. Like, you know, I'm sure Eilish, you know, you could do a show at 4 a.m. to get peak time in America, and so on and so forth. So it's also, you know, thinking about how we're going to replace touring in the short term.
That's a very, very... Sorry.
Or Hugo, your connection.
I know I glitched it. I'm sorry about that. I'm back though.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah, I was going to say that, like, many, you know, number of artists that I hit up to perform at Isolate felt that they didn't know or couldn't translate their shows to a live stream or to, you know, to an Instagram live. So I guess, yeah, just having that offering of live streaming an actual show would help a lot of artists, you know, to have the production and the cameras and all of that sort of, you know, hardware and production that, yeah, are not available at home. Yeah, it would just help them live stream. Whereas, yeah, Instagram and doing those things at home and whatever, like, just do not translate for some artists, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you touch on that as well. Hopefully I'm not glitchy at the moment. I think I'm okay, but apologies if I am. You know, there's a lot of artists that don't have access to a PA, or they don't have access to a, you know, 36 channel mixing board, or they don't have access to a keg on tap for people to drink beers at their house. And we've made venues for people to be able to go and for artists to be able to go, no matter if they've just like started rehearsing together a month ago and it's their first gig. They can, you know, have a sound engineer put them through this big sound system and they can perform a gig in front of, could be 5 people, it could be 100 people, it could be 500. But I wonder if it's something that can be built into almost like a venue backline experience, is this kind of tech, you know, that people can use to plug into a Twitch or a YouTube or a Facebook or anything like that, and be able to then, you know, as almost part of the backline expectation for venues, live streaming could be a component of that. I don't know if there's any thoughts you guys have on that. Maybe John?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I mean, we've been talking to quite a few venues about wanting to integrate this kind of setup into their existing production so that it's something else they can offer. And even in terms of offering the venue space almost as a studio, as I was saying, like, you know, if you're playing at, you know, 9 o'clock at night here at, say, the Hi-Fi Bar or Max Watts, whatever, a local venue, that stream at 8 o'clock in the morning in North America perhaps is not going to get any attention. So, you know, you could come back at 7 o'clock in the morning local time and perform to that market here and there. So I think a few of the venues are starting to think like just an extension of their house production. Or can we provide, you know, at the very least, a very simple, maybe 1 or 2 camera stream that people can use, and we can embellish it if we've got a bigger act, want to bring in more cameras, roving cameras, whatever. So yeah, look, I think a few of the venues are starting to think that way and starting to invest more in it as an enticement to the artists, for sure, but also as an enticement to a broader audience.
I think it's genius. I was actually under the impression that some of the funding that some of the artists were successful in securing was to be put towards streaming setups. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I also feel like as a festival booker or venue booker or anything that I've done in the past, just having footage of bands doing what they do live is invaluable, and so many artists don't have representative representations of what they do. They're sort of like, they'll send me a link to something, they're like, oh, we don't really sound like that anymore, or we don't, you know, so which isn't all that useful, but just to get an idea of what a band's doing. So not only you know, capturing the live stream and all of that, but also then potentially having a recording to then send to promoters, festival bookers, venues, agents, etc. Could be incredibly valuable.
And also, just quickly, I know I keep butting in, but there's also the archival purposes as well. Like if you had, like Music Victoria had an archival site with hundreds of gigs of Melbourne bands, and given the interest internationally for Melbourne music, you know, someone in Finland or Canada can log on Music Victoria and just spend hours trawling through all this content that's just been captured at all these gigs. Same for the venues, like they can build up a nice little archive and, you know, put together compilations or whatever else, but there's other revenue streams available and other forms that it can all take.
And it's amazing seeing how that can activate like a venue's socials or a festival's socials. And you see how much traffic like a radio station like KEXP gets through its Tiny Desk performances. And, you know, that's something that could be extended to any venue that has the infrastructure to support it. And it's important, I think, to bear that in mind. But I wanted to, Emily, did you have something on that? I was going to move us.
Just as an offshoot of that as well, like all the options, and then you could have like live recording releases and things, because, you know, people love a live at the Gasso recording, whatever. There's just many options, you know, there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah, it opens up a huge amount of doors, which is, I think, something that we've sort of skirted around a little bit. And John, in particular, I think you were saying, you know, access and the ability for this tool of live streaming and the interface of, you know, being able to log on and interact with the band or share your music. It can open up a lot of doors. But I think one thing that is really important to bear in mind is, you know, access to tech, access to internet, access to being able to figure out how the back end of Twitch works, to be able to, you know, set yourself up in there, or even literacy to be able to interact with a comment stream. You know, I think it is something that could very easily, you know, become culturally one-dimensional, the people that are using these tools. Eilish, is there any kind of thoughts you have on, you know, the issues and the access and the barriers that other people from a less tech-oriented background would have in trying to use these tools?
It's a really good question, and I think about it a lot. I think about it a lot in general in the music industry, because there's always that classic thing of like, well, you know, two bands get offered a support slot on a tour, and the band that can afford to make the loss is the band that's going to go. The band that can't afford to make the loss is the band that won't go and won't get to build their audience in that way. So there is a barrier, I suppose, when it comes to like setting up a Twitch stream, a financial barrier. For me, it wasn't so bad because I am like a producer and an electronic musician, I suppose. So I already had pretty much everything I needed. I mean, I'm just kind of looking at it now. I had everything I needed except for a webcam. And that was like $200 or something. So, you know, that was pretty good for me, but that may not be the experience of everybody. Ultimately, I had to buy a new computer. So that kind of went out the window. But initially, you know, the outlay was really manageable for me at the time. I do think, and also Twitch are always like, you know, you can just stream using the webcam on your computer, which is a perfectly acceptable way to stream, which would have meant no kind of financial outset. But yeah, I don't have an answer. I think I wish there was a way that we could make it more accessible to people. I think one good thing is that the people who work at Twitch ANZ, like the Australian offices and the New Zealand office, are absolutely delightful. And if there was, you know, a musician that was interested in Twitch, I'm sure that they would be able to shoot an email off to that office and they would get a very extensive, lovely answer back from them, because they've been incredibly supportive of me, and done that multiple times for me when I've had a question. And I think that's why I like the platform so much, because there really isn't that level of support from an actual person from like Instagram or Facebook or, you know, YouTube or whatever. The fact that you can email a person and be like, hey, listen, I'm having X problem, I'm interested in this, blah, 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 and that you'll actually probably get an answer back is remarkable in my eyes. So I think that, yes, there is like a financial barrier and a tech barrier. If you're not tech savvy, it can be tricky. I mean, I taught it to myself, and I'm not like a, you know, I'm not a genius. So it is accessible in that way to the layman, I suppose. But yeah, there are still issues there.
John or Emily, is there any kind of thoughts that you two have in relation to how we can make this technology a bit more accessible? Maybe John, if you want to go first.
Well, look, I think that it's a bit of an extension of what I was saying earlier about, you know, if venues start to get funding to be able to set up their own streaming service, it's something that they can offer to artists, you know, relatively cheaply or free, you know, based on a return from stream income, that, you know, they could host artists coming into their venue during the day, or, you know, on a Monday or Tuesday night. And perhaps, you know, even the government, Music Victoria, or someone there could be like a community studio set up, where it's, you know, access is open to everybody, and it's, you know, manned with a tech or two, and it's got all the gear, and people could, you know, just use it freely. And, you know, either it's subsidized or there's a percentage of the income or the stream income that goes back to the facility.
Emily, do you have any thoughts? That's
Yes.
John.
Probably similar. I think just sort of education sessions, the same way that Ableton has sort of made a huge push to educate musicians, particularly non-male musos, which I love, and First Nations and just underrepresented communities, which I think is incredible. And yeah, just I guess any sort of funding, government funding, to enable musicians to be able to afford these things, the cameras and the microphones. And but Eilish has been incredibly generous as well. She has like created this document that talks you through how to actually go live on Twitch. Because Eilish, you can probably explain it better than I can, but Twitch is not like Facebook and Instagram where you can just go live. Like, it's actually just a portal. I might let you explain it.
Well, when I first started, thank you, that's nice. When I first started streaming on Twitch, I'm really passionate about it, in case you haven't like noticed. I'm really passionate about it because it has done all these great things for me, including like generating an income, which is like so important. So I was giving a couple of lectures at a couple of like institutions that I teach at. And I was like, I should just do this for my musician friends, like to, you know, watch and become familiar with it. Because there's a lot of jargon. You cannot like go onto twitch.tv and be like, go live and like go live. You have to download some open source software, and it's all free. Like, you don't have to pay for anything, but like, it is a bit of a learning curve. And like, if anyone, I'm so happy to field any questions. Like, you know, you can DM me on Instagram. I'm more than happy to talk you through it. It's a little bit complicated, but I promise if I can do it, you can do it. And if anyone wants that lecture, just DM me on Instagram. I can give it to you. It's, you know, I don't look very nice while I'm doing it, but it's information that's good.
And just on that, I mean, we're 3 minutes short. It was always ambitious to cram in everything. So we might have to hold off questions, but to everyone who's listened, thank you guys and everybody so much for being involved and for, you know, listening to us, I guess, ponder some of the questions here. I might just leave us all, if each panelist wants to give us, it's a bit of like a, almost like a little game, but if you would just be able to take turns, one thing that we should keep from live streaming, one thing that we should reconsider or maybe remove, and one thing that we should develop going into 2021. Maybe Emily, if you want to go first.
So this is like the kill, marry, F word.
Well, yeah, I almost dropped that bomb, but
my parents are here, so I will not say that. So keep, chuck, develop.
Yeah.
So I would say keep live streaming, keep the new normal, keep access, chuck the old models and mentality of needing to put things back together and have gigs and everything the way they were. So chuck the old normal, and develop and educate artists. What we were just saying, educate artists, educate venues, educate the patrons that this is a new way that we can enjoy music and develop our amazing artists and our amazing music community.
John, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, look, I think I agree pretty much with what Emily was saying. Like, to chuck, I think it's just the restrictive mentality. Not so much the old normal. It's just, I think it's more about seeing it as a limitless opportunity. So we need to, I think we keep that and we just build on it. And that's what next year and the next couple of years is about. And I think it's super exciting to see what these emerging artists and like the guys that are, and girls that are already into the technology, like Eilish, like Flume, like those acts, what can they bring to this new party of how, like, because they started dropping video in live shows, you know, big video screens behind it, like what's next? And I think that's what's exciting about what's coming up.
And Eilish?
Well, I think, I kind of forgot the question, but I'm going to say very much keep live streaming as a new thing. It's new. It's not live streaming like gigs. It's live streaming as a new concept or a newish concept. I think we should keep that for sure. I think we should definitely try to eliminate the inaccessibility of live gigs, I suppose, perhaps through one small aspect of like adding more live stream content that might make it easier for people who don't feel safe or don't feel comfortable in live situations. I think like live streaming presents a pretty nice alternative there. It's not the alternative. I think venues need to be more accessible. That's a whole kind of other conversation. I also think that we need to develop, like, I think we need to teach artists about the benefits of live streaming and the fact that it can generate income. Like, that is the one thing that I think people don't really get. And it is possible to make money doing live streaming, I promise. Like, it's not an easy slog, but it's hard. I mean, it's possible, you know?
Amazing. Well, thank you, John, Emily, and Eilish for joining, and thanks for Music Vic for having us, you know, opening up a space for us to explore this. It's been really, really fantastic. I might, put a pin in it there. So, Ash, is there anything else we need to do? I know you're there in the background, kind of pulling all the strings.
I just want to thank you, Hugo. You are just such a great moderator. Great questions. So thoughtful. Thank you.
No worries. Cheers to everyone, and have a fantastic evening, and happy holidays, and celebrate the end of a crappy year.
Thanks so much, Hugo. Good on you.
Bye, mates.